A historic flood suddenly strikes, submerging the entire countryside in a vast sea of water. Amid the raging waters, Jack risks his life to save the trapped Tien. The breathtaking journey begins here. Watch the video to learn more. Everything happened in a panic. Tien hurriedly hugged the tabby cat. She called the puppies, they barked loudly. Panicked in the rising water, she wanted to rush over. But the water was like a rage of heaven and earth, rushing into the house, drowning the children in an instant. In the sound of rain and wind, she only had time to hear the barking sounds that faded away and then stopped. In pain, she screamed, but there was no time to cry. When the first rays of morning sunlight shone through the leaves, shining on the young mud that remained everywhere, the whole small village seemed to have just woken up from a terrible dream. The rain had stopped since dawn, and the water had also begun to recede, but what it left behind could not be dissolved in a day. Cracks, both in the ground and in people's hearts. Tien stood silently in front of the porch, or rather, the place that used to be her porch. From the cozy, familiar house, now there were only 4 mud-stained walls, a shabby tiled roof, and furniture in disarray as if it had just gone through a battle. A broken bamboo chair lay in the middle of the yard. Clothes were flying everywhere and hung on a tree branch. The kitchen cabinet was overturned, and an old mat drifted out to the fence. The smell of mold, mud, garbage, and other foul things mixed together to create an indescribably heavy atmosphere. She felt as if every brick, every item was complaining about being abandoned in the stormy night. The mother dog was still lying there, on the wet steps, her eyes like 2 sad brown pearls. It did not bark, did not meow, just lay there looking into the distance, as if guarding an invisible loss. She tried to save it, but the puppies were swept away by the water in an instant. The feeling of helplessness as she watched that little life disappear right before her eyes, she could never forget. The whole night, Tien barely slept. The cold, hunger, pain and fear kept squeezing her heart. If it weren't for the cat, if it weren't for the mother dog, she would have collapsed right there on the hill. While she was looking at the ruins, suddenly from afar, a familiar voice rang out, mixed with the sound of footsteps wading through the mud. Tien. Her heart seemed to stop beating for a moment. Tien turned around abruptly. From the thin mist and the wet tree trunks, Jack appeared. He was wading through the road with rushing floodwater. His shirt was torn at the shoulders. His hair was matted with rainwater. His face was covered in mud. But his eyes, those eyes were still those of the boy who had stood in the rain waiting for her to finish work. Still the one who had called her when the wind started to blow. Tien couldn't say anything. Her hands were hanging limply, her eyes wide open. She walked step by step towards Jack, her legs trembling as if she was about to collapse. Then suddenly ran really fast, rushed to hug him like hugging a life buoy in the ocean. And then she burst into tears. There was no more restraint, no more distance, only a burst of sobs as if wanting to release all the frustration, fear, and exhaustion. You're here," she whispered like a child. "I thought I would never see you again." Jack wrapped his arms around her, patting her back like he was soothing a child who had lost a toy. But he knew that what she had lost was not just an object, it was a part of her childhood. Her safety, her familiar home. He said nothing, just held her tighter, letting her feel that she no longer had to struggle alone. Jack wrapped his arms around her, patting her back like a child crying over a lost toy. But he knew that what she had lost was not just an object, but a part of her childhood. Safety, a familiar home. He said nothing, just held her tighter, letting her feel that she no longer had to struggle alone. When the emotion subsided, they walked around the house together. Each step was a sigh, a shake of the head, a memory drowned in mud. In the corner of the kitchen, the cat cage lay tilted, still with the claw marks of the loofah. Next to the garden, the rose bush was now bare of dry branches. "It can be fixed," Jack said, his voice hoarse but determined. "I will help you, little by little." Tien nodded, then sat down on the ground. She stopped crying. Mud stained her clothes. Her hair was messy, but her eyes were brighter when she looked at Jack. In the midst of all that chaos, she found her footing again. They began to clean up. No tools, just their bare hands. Jack bent down and scooped out handfuls of mud. Tien gathered the clothes, wrung them out, and hung them on the remaining fence. The mother dog followed quietly behind them, stopping to sniff and whine softly, as if calling her children. The tabby cat had climbed up on the rafters, lying there with her eyes half closed, looking down, her tail occasionally swaying as if to reassure her master. A moment later, from the small slope at the end of the village, people began to arrive. Some carried shovels, others carried brooms, and a few men even carried water pumps. A voice called out, "Tien, is your family okay? Do you need anything else?" That's how the villagers are. They may be poor, they may not be well educated, but their love is as abundant as the ripe rice in the fields. No one asked her what she had lost. Only, "Are you okay? Have you eaten anything? Where did you sleep last night?" She felt her heart strangely warm. The commune authorities also came, bringing several boxes of instant noodles, clean water, and a few packs of medicine. They recorded the damage, gave careful instructions, and promised to provide support as soon as possible. Jack did not leave her side for a moment. Even though his hand was bleeding from pulling on broken glass, he still smiled. Anything broken can be mended, as long as we are alive. Uncle Nam, the neighbor next door, wearing rubber boots up to his knees, stood in the middle of the yard and said loudly, "Don't worry, son, my house is finished. Now come clean your house. Today, whoever has strength, contribute strength. Whoever has goods, contribute goods. As long as there is Tien in our village, there is still a house." That sentence seemed to light a small fire in Tien's heart. She nodded, trying to hold back her emotions, then quickly ran to bring clean water to wash each person's hands. Suddenly, a feeling of gratitude welled up in her heart, not because they helped, but because they came naturally, without anyone telling them. A group of young men began to help Jack lift the cabinets, tables, and wet items out to the yard to dry in the sun. Each time they lifted them up, a puddle of muddy water flowed out, mixed with mud and trash. Sister Tu and Aunt Sao were busy gathering up the remaining things like blankets, pillows, mats, pots and pans, then shaking them out to dry. Inside the house, the elderly men were carefully prying apart the warped floorboards from the water, neatly arranging them in the corner of the yard. Some even went up to the roof to see if the corrugated iron sheets blown away by the wind could be re-roofed. The mud in the house was swept into large basins and dumped away from the living area. They worked without stopping, but still chattered. "The sky is clearing up. Hurry up and do it before it rains again. We're done. Let's go to Uncle Bay's house. Let's split up and make it in time." The laughter mixed with the sound of shovels scooping mud, the sound of water pouring down, and the voices calling out to each other made the seemingly dilapidated scene come alive and full of vitality. The fragments of life that seemed to be buried under mud are now being picked up, little by little, with humanity and love. When the cleanup was almost done, Uncle Tam, the person in charge of the village Red Cross, brought a few buckets of clean water, a few bags of rice, and some cooking oil, salt, and sugar. He said, "The commune government told us to go down and check on each household. Tien's family suffered heavy damage, but with the help of the neighbors, it's a bit better. Try your best, my child." Tien bowed her head in thanks, tears rolling down her cheeks covered in dirt and sand. But this time they were tears of gratitude, no longer of fear. She turned to look at Jack. He also smiled, his eyes shining with joy when he saw his beloved surrounded by warm hearts. That scene, a house that had just escaped a flood, in the middle of a muddy yard but filled with laughter, hands helping each other up, was like a picture that most clearly depicted human love in the midst of adversity. No one was rich, but everyone was willing. No one spoke loudly, but their actions rang out like a bell of salvation. When the afternoon fell, the crowd gradually left. Someone even said, "We'll come back tomorrow to help clean the garden. Don't do it all yourself." Tien stood silently in front of the gate, watching each person disappear down the alley. The afternoon wind blew through her messy hair, carrying the scent of damp soil, the smell of young mud. But there was another scent that was more obvious, the scent of family love. Late afternoon, when the sun was setting on the mountain, Jack's mother, she brought a basket of hot rice, 2 bowls of cabbage soup with meat, and a pot of fragrant braised fish. She didn't say much, just nodded slightly in greeting, then quietly looked around. The flood had left clear traces. Walking around the house, she touched each door and each window frame with her hand, her eyes shining with worry and sorrow. Perhaps she didn't say it, but that look was enough for people to understand that she was heartbroken, as if her own house had been destroyed. After a round of looking around, she turned to look at Tien, her gaze gentle like a real mother. She nodded, saying, "Luckily, you guys are safe. We can still repair the house. As long as we have people, we have everything. My children, eat, my children," she said, her voice trembling. "It's hard, but as long as we have people, we have everything." Tien tearfully accepted the chopsticks. They sat eating on the porch, which used to be a shelter from the sun and rain, but is now a muddy space. But that meal, braised fish, white rice, and cabbage soup, was the best meal she had ever had. Because she had family, love, and hearts that were not washed away. She looked up at Jack, then smiled. During the storm, she had lost a lot. But after the storm, she had found more, love, hope, and a hand that would never let go.
Xin chào mọi người nha. Bài thơ sáng cha. Con lớn lên giữa những ngày nắng gắt, bóng cha nghiêng trên cánh đồng khô khát. Lưng áo sạm màu, chân chai sỏi đá, chẳng nói nhiều nhưng tình lại bao la. Cha ít nói nhưng ánh nhìn ấm áp, cúi nhặt từng đồng nuôi giấc con xa. Những bữa cơm chan mồ hôi lặng lẽ, mà tình thương thì chẳng thể nào che. Tuổi thơ con đôi lúc hờ vô cớ, bỏ cha lại sau những tiếng thở dài. Mãi lớn khôn mấy hay lòng cha đó, chẳng ồn ào nhưng chất ngất vặn trên vai. Có hôm mưa con về ngang lỗi cú, thấy dáng cha gầy tóc đã phai sương. Bàn tay thô năm nào con ôm ngủ, giờ run run như níu giữ quê hương. Nếu một ngày cha lặng im chẳng nói, hãy để con ngồi kể chuyện ngày xưa. Dù muộn màng con xin lời xin lỗi, vì yêu thương con đã hiểu bây giờ.